Morning, everybody. If you're having a boring day, we brought you to a place where you can get a drink and get your day started right. Well, I'm excited to be here with our council member from Ward 5, a gentleman who I just absolutely thoroughly enjoy working with. Of course, that's Councilmember Kenyan McDuffie, who you will hear from soon. Thank you very much, Councilmember McDuffie, for being here with us today and for working hand in hand with us to be able to get to this day. We're very proud to be here. And this is, of course, the official release of Ward 5 Works, which is the Ward 5 Industrial Land Transformation Study. The study is a strategy to modernize, upgrade, and invest in the industrial areas of Ward 5. Joining us as well is Ellen McCarthy, who is our acting director for the D.C. Office of Planning. And Ellen is anything but acting as far as I'm concerned. She is a sterling professional and has added mightily to our efforts to continue to plan the city. Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate everything that you do. I want to thank New Columbia Distillers, which is also known as Green Hat Gin Distilleries, for hosting us. And in case you didn't know where you were, if your olfactory system is working today, you can figure that out quite quickly. It's the first distillery to open in the district in 100 years. That would be the day of bootleggers, right? Ted, you were the first one to clap. It's a family-owned business. New Columbia, and I love the name, New Columbia, is an example of the adaptive industrial site reuse that was explored in the study. Though the name of the study is Ward 5 Works, its findings are critical to the entire District of Columbia. For us, and I think for the council member too, because he's been so vitally involved in this, it serves as an important companion piece to our 5-year economic development strategy and also our Sustainable D.C. plan, which we are continuing to move ahead with apace. In fact, again, I want to thank the council for adopting the legislation that we signed just a few weeks ago that actually bans the use of styrofoam beginning in January 1st, 2016. Ward 5 is home, and you know this, council member, to roughly 50% of all the industrial land in the district, and actually 15% of the ward's total land area is dedicated to that use, that sector. Modernizing and upgrading Ward 5's industrial land is key to growing and attracting new businesses and employers to our city, as well, of course, as enhancing Ward 5 for the residents of Ward 5. This is yet another step forward for our administration and, again, working with the council in achieving a goal that I set out in the One City Action Plan now, which is 2.5, 3 years old, and that is growing and diversifying the district's economy. It's in keeping with our 5-year economic development strategy, which has twin goals, and that is the creation of 100,000 new jobs and generating $1 billion in new tax revenue to support city services over the 5 years since the plan was unveiled in late 2012. I'm sure some of you know that in the first year we generated $281 million in additional tax revenue, and we created almost 18,000 jobs, which would put us on a trajectory of 90,000 jobs for the 5 years and $1.4 billion in new tax revenue for the same 5-year period. A year and a half ago at Union Market, which of course is a great example itself in the transformation that is the heart of the plan, I was proud to announce with Councilmember McDuffie the creation of a 16-member Ward 5 Industrial Land Transformation Task Force. We asked the task force to develop the strategic plan that we are ecstatic to be able to announce today. We also appointed a panel of cabinet and senior level leaders in various agencies, including planning and economic development, public works, transportation, the environment, and general services. What I wanted was high-level participation to ensure the full support of a plan that addresses the needs of agencies and facilities located in Ward 5. I also appointed, with the input of the council member, 8 committed and dedicated public members to join the task force, some of whom I know are here with us today. Eric Jones, who is a resident of the Bates Truxton neighborhood and is also the Associate Director of Government Affairs at the Associated Builders and Contractors of Metro Washington. Eric, thank you very much for being here today. Vicki Leonard, longtime Ward 5 resident and Economic Development Advisor for the Mid-Atlantic Laborers Cooperation Trust. Pettigay Lewis, who is the Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for ANC 5D01. Ron Dixon, President and CEO of the Dixon Group, a media business group that's based in Ward 5. Jay Green, who is a Ward 5 resident, housing policy expert, and actually at one time was the director of the Department of Housing and Community Development in the city. Eddie Johnson, who is a Ward 5 resident, an architect, and a longtime community activist. And Carol Mitten, who used to be the chair of the Zoning Commission and also was the director of what formerly was the Office of Property Management, the functions of which have now been folded into the Department of General Services. I want to thank them for their work in making this happen, and I ask you now to let's give them a big hand. With Ward 5 Works, the task force has created a forward-looking strategy. And if it's based on volume alone, it has to get an A+, ladies and gentlemen. We hope that you will rush right home, read every page of this, and commit it to memory, because there will be a quiz on it at some later stage. It looks at the transformation into productive areas of some of the blighted areas and transforming them into a hub of jobs and entrepreneurship opportunities that could include green, creative, technology, jobs, and opportunities, as well as food production. With this strategy, we are writing the future of our often forgotten industrial areas. I can proudly say that this is the first time, I think, in the city, the first administration, especially working with the council member, to have fully grasped the strategic importance of these areas for growing a more equitable economic future for the district. One where we will increase our population, or continue to increase our population, which we think is now around 660,000 people, yet still be able to provide first-class municipal services to our citizenry, to our residents. In every economic development and jobs initiative, our goal is to create high-paying opportunities, and the Ward 5 industrial sector is absolutely no exception, especially since many of the associated functions call for people to be trained on the job, trained as a part of their job for lifelong careers. This also was an opportunity to identify and address residents' concerns about nuisance, about pollution, and operational problems associated with existing industrial uses. I believe that we have to continue to address existing social, economic, and environmental issues related to how a handful of our industrial areas perform today. I say a handful because I think that is right. After surveying all of the parcels in more than 1,000 acres of study, we found that, council member, that there are over 500 businesses operating here that provide jobs, services, and tax revenues for the district, yet only a few, just a few, are routinely identified by residents as being a nuisance for the ward and for the city. This strategy was generated from the study, offers several policy and design solutions to tackle these issues so that we can move past talking about problems and instead direct action to make these areas a real asset for the ward and for the District of Columbia at large. For industrial areas, our industrial areas are also where many of our core municipal facilities are located to serve the operations which keep our city going. For example, there's a lot of DPW, Department of Public Works operations located in Ward 5 and in our industrial areas that deal with street cleaning, with plowing, and with making road repairs. Given our rapid population growth, our agencies will be required to work essentially from the same amount of industrial land that we have today, but to provide even more services for the people of the District of Columbia. For this reason, it is important to look at these industrial areas as assets that must be preserved and I'm going to underscore, improved. Ward 5 Works found that the district's industrial land is a scarce resource that accounts for less than 5% of the city's total land area, less than 5% of the total area. There are not many cities that have such a small percentage of its land devoted to industrial uses. And in some respects, of course, that's a good thing. On the other hand, it reduces the number of jobs that are available to us, especially manufacturing type jobs. I certainly look forward to seeing how our agencies will work with the Ward 5 residents and with the Ward 5 businesses to be able to implement this strategy over the next 5 years as is outlined in the study, and also to make these areas the absolute envy of other cities across the U.S. And most importantly, an asset for nearby communities. Speaking of being the envy, we're passing out our new rankings cards today, and you'll see how we are increasingly being ranked as one of the top cities in the nation, and in some cases one of the top states in the nation. And frankly, for practical purposes, we are both. We are a city and a state all rolled into one. Now I want to bring up Councilmember McDuffie. Again, I want to express my appreciation to him for having worked with us to be able to make this happen. He's been involved from the very outset of this effort, and I want to thank him again for his involvement. Councilmember McDuffie.
Good morning. Wow. It's kind of really quiet. Good morning. I'm going to try it one more time. Good morning. Good morning. This is an exciting day to be in Ward 5. Very exciting day to be in Ward 5. I want to begin by thanking some of the folks who helped to make this day possible. And obviously, it begins with the person standing to my left. I have to tell you, almost 2 years ago, back in November 2012, shortly after I got reelected, I introduced a piece of legislation to create an industrial land transformation task force in Ward 5. And I did so because of all the decades of angst, anger, strife, smells, problems associated with some of the nuisance properties in Ward 5. And I did so because of the residents of Ward 5 wanted this to happen. And shortly after I introduced the legislation, I went to a dinner, Robert, over at the Ward 5, the 5th District Citizens Advisory Council dinner, and I ran into none other than Mayor Vincent C. And we were chatting about a host of things, and this task force and legislation that I introduced that came up, without hesitation, he said, you know what, Kenyon, I can do this a lot quicker by executive order. And I didn't have to plead. I didn't have to beg for the mayor to get involved in this. He did it on his own initiative, and we've been working collaboratively ever since. He deserves a lot of credit for getting us to this day that we're here today to really celebrate this very important document. So let's give Mayor Vincent C. Gray a round of applause. But you know who else deserve a lot of credit for helping us get to this day? It is the residents of Ward 5. It is the activists, the civic association presidents, the ANC commissioners, and other leadership in Ivy City, Trinidad, Brentwood, Michigan Park, Eckington, all those areas in Ward 5 that have had to live with the industrial land. Now, the mayor said something that's very important. Ward 5 has over 50% of the industrial land in the entire city. It's located, and we're home to it. We host it. But it's only a small percentage of some of those businesses that have actually been nuisances to the neighbors. And part of this effort was to re-envision and redefine and really put some facts out there as to what's happening in the industrial land. We've got over 500 businesses that make up the industrial land in Ward 5, and a good number of them, including New Columbia Distilleries and a host of others, are doing a yeoman's job of running businesses and employing people in Ward 5 and outside of Ward 5, and they deserve a round of applause as well. You know, for decades, residents in Ward 5 have talked about the smells that they've had to deal with emanating from trash transfer stations. They've talked about the smells that were emanating from some of the places that paint the vehicles and things like that. And it's really been trying to have to deal with that, and it's impacted negatively their quality of life. And that's a fact. I've smelled it myself, and I've walked over to those areas. But for too long, all we've done in Ward 5 is talk about what we don't want. We don't want this, we don't want that. We've got a lot of municipal properties, salt domes, and other heavy vehicle equipment from DDOT and DPW, and so we don't want it. What this was about, and what the mayor understood, and other residents in Ward 5 understood, is that we had to take all those years of frustration and turn it into something that we actually do want. We don't want to continue to say we don't want this, we don't want that. Here is a blueprint in all these beautiful pages in color to describe and lay out the foundation and the blueprint for what Ward 5 can be and what it will be if we continue to work together and make these things happen. I am so pleased to be representing this area and having worked with the likes of people like Commissioner Pettigay-Lewis, Eric Jones, Vicki Leonard, Jay Green, Eddie Johnson, Ron Dixon, Carol Mitten, and all the agency heads and representatives who participated. They were committed to this process. We took tours of Ward 5, visited these industrial areas. They saw for themselves all the benefits and all the potential and all these businesses. They also smelled for themselves some of the problems that we were experiencing. We brought residents into this process. We had an open house to talk about all the things we're going to do. And at the end of the day, this is a prime example of how government can work with the community, how government can work with businesses collectively to make sure that we benefit the community. This is only the start now. Obviously, you know, we have to execute everything that's within these pages. But having had the commitment of the mayor, having had the commitment of all these government representatives who are here today, who participated in those meetings, all those residents who are here today, and the communities, like Ivy City, where we stand today, but also throughout the rest of the ward, I know that they've got the will and the energy because they've represented that energy for decades now. I'm excited about what's in these pages. I'm excited about Ward 5 Works. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I know together we can get it done. Thank you so much, Mayor Gray. Thank you so much for everybody who participated in this. Let's go out, let's start to execute, and let's make sure we continue to transform positively the future of Ward 5. Thank you all. I apologize. I left one person out who is here today, who, quite frankly, really labored over this. My staff has been hard at work for the last 2 years. Jane Yuzuku, Karen Johnson is here, Todd Mia is here. But one person who no longer works in my staff, who actually helped and actually drafted the legislation to create this bill and who really spearheaded this effort, who unfortunately we lost a couple of months ago, is Stephanie Atkinson. Stephanie, I want you to stand so everybody knows who you are and how much work you put into this. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember McDuffie. I want to call upon now Director of the Office of Planning, who has enormous experience at these kinds of things and has done a great job in so many ways. Please welcome Ellen McCarthy.
Good morning. I would like to thank Mayor Gray for his leadership on this important economic development strategy and Councilmember McDuffie for your support and partnership in the effort. The Office of Planning was honored to chair this effort, which began under my predecessor, Harriet Trigoni, and to work with the task force members. I wanted to add my thanks to the thanks that have already been given today for the hard work in pulling together and finding the nugget of the good news in what had been so many complaints over the years. As our city changes and grows dramatically, so have our industrial areas. And in fact, back in 2006, in my first stint as planning director, we heard the complaints about industrial land. We also saw a lot of development pressures to convert that land to other more profitable uses. So we commissioned a study that looked at what was the role of industrial land and what were other cities doing. And what it told us was that a lot of the industrial uses, or Ward 5 in a lot of ways reflects the history of the changes in the economy in the country and in the city, where we've talked about what a high percentage of industrial land is in Ward 5. It's because back in the day, everything happened by the railroad. So wherever the rail lines were, that's where you had the industrial uses. So many of the goods so many of the goods that were used in manufacturing came by train, and so many of the products were shipped out by train. And when we looked around in 2006, we realized that a lot of the businesses, or a lot of the structures that had been here because of the businesses that were depending on those rail lines weren't here anymore. There was a lot of decaying buildings, a lot of crumbling infrastructure. But fortunately, we looked around at what other cities had been experiencing and realized that there was the beginning of a resurgence in the maker economy and in uses for that industrial land. And we said, you know, we can't afford to rezone that away. We've got to find ways for that to be used productively. But I don't think then we ever would have envisioned the incredible transformation that has occurred. And New Columbia Distillery is just one of those maker kinds of uses, the creative enterprises, creative incubators, tech startups, green businesses. New Columbia came and transformed what had been an obscure and languishing warehouse into the gleaming distillery that you see behind me today. There's a local food revolution going on all around us, and Ivy City and Ward 5 in general are ready to leverage that momentum for the benefit of the community. In Ivy City alone, there are now 2 distilleries, 1 brewery, and 1 shared kitchen food incubator operation. So, you know, back in 2006, who knew? Ward 5 Works gives the district a clear roadmap on how to fully engage in the transformation and magnify it by addressing community issues and environmental performance, by doing branding and business attraction, providing financial incentives and technical assistance, dealing with zoning and land use conflicts, startup space creation, workforce training, community amenities, and more, as you'll see when you look at the document. And I did want to take a minute and thank our consultants on this project, led by Air St. Gross, with assistance from PES, the economic consultants, and Rheingold Link, who assisted in the community outreach. And certainly to thank the very talented and extremely hardworking staff at the Office of Planning that worked to bring those recommendations together and to get the document done. We propose that by implementing Ward 5 Works, Within 5 years, the industrial areas of Ward 5 will have been transformed to such a degree that they will become the envy of all the other wards, boasting such bastions of creativity and job creation and entrepreneurial activity, unique character, and high environmental performance that other wards and other cities will wish they had them too. It may sound wishful today, but look around Ivy City, Florida Avenue Market, or Brookland, and think back what these used to look like in 2006 when we first studied them. Now they are overflowing with artist spaces, breweries, gelato factories, markets, tool libraries, distilleries, restaurants, and more. The new industrial revolution is happening already, and with Ward 5 Works, we want to lead it. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll be happy to take any questions that you may have on Ward 5 Works. From the media? Yes.
At one point, there was some concern just about the number of nightclubs that were in Ward 5, and I believe Mr. McDuffie had talked a little bit at one point about trying to have a.
The acoustics are really difficult in here, so I apologize. Can you come forward and maybe speak up just a tad?
Sorry, yeah, I was talking about the nightclubs in Ward 5. At one point, I believe you had talked about trying to have a moratorium, but I know that didn't end up going forward on those. Just wanted to see how those kind of fit in and how you see working with them.
I appreciate the question. I was not going to move towards a moratorium on nightclubs. It was a push by some of the residents to go in that direction, in large part due to their frustrations associated with all that comes with having those clubs when they let out. A lot of trash, litter, debris, a lot of other activity that has negatively impacted the quality of life of residents who live in that area in Ward 5, particularly in that Langdon, Woodridge, sort of south area. Now, my efforts have been to write letters and express the concerns of residents to the ABC board. And in fact, as a result, a couple of licenses have been denied, and a couple of existing licenses, I believe, have been not renewed recently. So the effort is to diversify those areas to make sure that they represent, in some parts, the interests of the residents of Ward 5. We've got a lot of nightclubs. We've got a few as a matter of fact, we have all the privately owned trash transfer stations in the city are in Ward 5. And so part of it was re-envisioning those areas and making sure that there's an inventory of industrial land to bring in some new uses. Let's do some urban farming. Let's do some more creative uses and have more amenities for residents to enjoy, as opposed to having to deal with some of the negativity around nightclubs and things like that. But it's not an effort to get rid of businesses that are doing great work, who are employing residents. It's just an effort to really diversify, re-envision, and rethink how we do industrial land in this city.
Thank you, Councilmember. If I can just add to that also, one need only ride up and down New York Avenue to see the renaissance that is taking place along that corridor. Ride from, for example, Florida Avenue out to Bladensburg Road on New York Avenue, and look at what is happening there. You look at the Hex warehouse, which Doug Jamal is working on, now owns, the retail and residential opportunities that will be located there. You look at the hotels. There's a new hotel further down on New York Avenue that is now open. It's a Hyatt Place, and 2 hotels that are being built right now. In fact, it's a good example of the foreign direct investment that we've been able to generate. EB5 money is helping to catalyze that. Both of those hotels is the principal investment. So there's a lot that's happening in concert with what the council member said, and in concert with Ward 5 Works, to be able to recast what these areas of Ward 5 are about. We actually, we have a bus facility, special education bus facility, and we're already looking at whether there's some ways to consolidate what we do there, because we know that land will become attractive for further desired uses in Ward 5 as we move forward in the years ahead. Other questions on Ward 5? Yes.
So three questions about.
You know, can you stand up and project? I apologize for putting you through this, but it's a cavernous in here.
No problem. Three questions about the transportation aspect of the plan. The idea for new MARC stations. I was wondering how that came about and if it's been discussed at all with the Maryland Department of Transportation yet.
Can you repeat the question? I think we're really having trouble here. I know you mentioned transportation.
Sorry, the MARC stations. Are there any plans in the work to have near-term discussions with the Maryland Department of Transportation about the possibility for having those? And two, for you, Mayor Gray, does this year's budget affect at all the plan to have a streetcar route in Ward 5?
To have what now?
Streetcars in Ward 5?
Streetcars. Well, we would love to have streetcars. We had planned a 22-mile, 37-mile system, and unfortunately the council had other plans. Ward 5, the 8th Street line will open this year. The operators are being trained now. They're actually operating the streetcars from the Hopscotch Bridge out to Oklahoma Avenue. But frankly, as we've said on many occasions, virtually all the money was taken and used for other purposes. 78% of the dollars that we had committed to streetcars now being used for other purposes. So unless there's some budgetary changes that take place, I would say the future of streetcars beyond the 8th Street line is really substantially imperiled in the city. You want to talk about the Maryland plan?
A timely question on the rail. We actually have a meeting this week with the DDOT, and we are talking to them about the regional rail plan. So nothing has been decided, but it's certainly on our radar screen.
If I could, Ellen wasn't here when some of those conversations were happening, so that aspect of the Ward 5 Works Plan was discussed fairly early on in the process, and this was just one of the concepts we had about how we activate certain areas in Ward 5 around industrial land like New York Avenue. And so the idea of an infill MARC station was just something that had been thrown out as a part of a broader discussion of how we improve mass transit in certain areas where we had a lot of warehouses where we want to rethink those areas. New York Avenue, as the mayor mentioned, is really coming to life now with the things that Doug Jamal is doing with the Hex Warehouse and the EB5 investments for the hotel along New York Avenue. And so as recently as this past budget for 2015, I put in funding, so we created a retail priority area for that New York Avenue area, and we've got the Costco, and now we've got the Lowe's over at Fort Lincoln, and so there are a lot of things that are going on there, and if we can expand opportunities to get people in and out of that area outside of their vehicles, then that's why we had the idea of perhaps an infill MARC station, or perhaps a spur is another idea. We have a spur off the 8th Street line coming up Bladensburg Road to New York Avenue. So just ideas that were a part of the broader conversation that we had about mass transit in that area. We've got, I think it's the most highly traveled corridor in this city, and I'm looking at Jeff, who's the deputy mayor. I believe there's 123,000 vehicles at last count that we got from DDOT that come in and out of that corridor, New York Avenue and Bladensburg Road, for every 24-hour period. So we were just thinking about some things we might be able to do.
All right, thank you. Other questions on the principal topic of this? Mr. Sherwood?
I got here a little bit late. Did someone say how many jobs are being done in this facility and what kind of economic impact it's having?
The owner is here. Where is the owner?
I don't know if you...
Okay.
I can ask him after the press conference if you like, but I just didn't know if you had said so.
Well, you better catch him now because he may be drinking, you know. Yeah, you're talking about, is this specific?
Yes,
Yes,
this is still New Columbia.
Come on, you got to come to the mic.
Let's say your name and we'll have who you are.
Yes, my name is Michael Lowe, and I'm co-owner of New Columbia Distillers. We have 4 employees right now, and we're looking to add 2 or 3 more over the next year or so.
The volume of your business so far, I know you're fairly new.
We've been in production for about 2 years. We're producing this year probably about 3,500 cases of gin. Much of which is sold in the district, but also in Maryland and Virginia and Delaware. So we're expanding, at a nice pace, and we're very pleased with the reception we've gotten in Ward 5, and in particular in Ivy City. So we've been very very blessed by this process.
Seen in permitting and all of that from the city government, a partner or a pain?
The licensing was not particularly difficult. The construction permitting problem, I think everybody who's done any commercial construction in the district will roll their eyes, but we got through it.
Thank you. Have you tasted it, Mr. Mayor?
I will if you will.
Sounds like an ice bucket challenge.
By the way, I appreciate his commercial for DCRA when he talked about licensing and permitting. We've really done a lot of work there to make that a much less onerous process, a more pleasant process. And for those who haven't been down to DCRA, you ought to go. The One City portal, which is in the offing, and the Project Docs initiative is yet another. So much has been digitized. The digital world has come to DCRA, and things move much more quickly. People don't even have to take all of those rolls of blueprints and plans down there anymore. You can take a thumb drive down there, and it can be used for purposes of inspections.
On that subject, Mr. Mayor, in development here, I have heard some concerns and complaints about DCRA that the process at the office is good, but there's a long delay in inspectors coming out, signing up to go to a home or to a business to sign off on the project so it can go forward, and that can be months long when it should be, most people think, weeks long.
I'm actually not familiar with the time, but I will find out. I'll make sure that Robbie Sabacon gets that information as soon as we finish, right, Jeff? Okay. And if there's more details you have to that, let us know. We'll get on it right away. Other questions on the topic of Ward 5 works? All right. Those who came for that, you're welcome to leave. And if you want to stay around for the other part of the biweekly briefing, you're welcome to do that as well. Thank you, Councilmember. Okay.
We're going to be starting back up for the rest of the bi-weekly, so others who are not staying for the bi-weekly, please take your conversations outside. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very nice way of saying get out. Those who have additional questions, I'm going to ask you to try to enunciate as clearly as you can, because it is cavernous in here, and the acoustics are a bit of a challenge. Okay. Will?
So your potential predecessors in the mayor's office have been criticizing the school boundaries proposal. Muriel Bowser says it's going to increase income inequality. What do you think of that?
I think that we ought not politicize something of this importance. We put out there a plan that has been worked on for 10 months. We ought to leave the politics out of this. We've tried to do that since we started education reform, and this is yet another opportunity to avoid the political demagoguery that unfortunately gives rise to these opportunities. We should remember that it's been 40 years, more than 40 years really, since we had a substantive, comprehensive review of the school assignment policies and the boundaries in the District of Columbia. We spent 10 months on this. Deputy Mayor Smith, I think, did a great job of working on this. It was an iterative process, very involved. Hundreds, thousands of people participated in this. It will not take, full effect until 2015-16 school year. And there's a phasing and grandfathering process that's involved in this that will allow this to unfold in a very orderly fashion. I've asked the Deputy Mayor and the Chancellor has enthusiastically signed on to this. She's obviously the one who's most affected at this point by the new boundaries and new school assignment policies. She signed on enthusiastically to this. I've asked the two of them to come together and present an implementation plan to me by the end of October. And we're moving ahead, full speed. And I think if any council member, be it those who are running for mayor or any other council member, has substantive ideas, we'd be happy to receive those. We have rolled out the plan, obviously, but there will be continued opportunities for people to have input. So I hope that people will resist the opportunity to demagogue this issue and will actually engage in something that is hugely important for our families and our children in the city.
Mr. Mayor, follow up to that. I think Muriel Bowser told the Washington Post last night in this morning's paper that the Chancellor will have she's going to start over, and that the Chancellor will have no role in the boundaries. No role.
Well, that's a very unwise move, in my opinion. Why would you exclude the Chancellor, who is the head of our, public education, traditional public education system, from such an important process? I believe she was the one that asked the Chancellor to stay as well, too. So I don't understand that. I think people ought to get off the politics, frankly, and let's stay with the substantive aspects of this. And if somebody has some ideas to offer to this, we welcome those ideas. They had 10 months within which to participate. Actually, they had 40-some years, Tom, within which to participate. And I'm still, some people haven't gotten a memo from or a substantive idea from at all. The council even had a hearing on this back in June that was convened by Councilmember Catania. So in the interest of our families, in the interest of our children, let's do the substantive work of how our children go to school and leave the other stuff for somewhere else. Aaron.
Well, did Councilmember Bowser, before her statement yesterday, have any contact with you about the boundary proposal?
No.
Are you guys speaking about any potential success?
I see Councilmember Bowser in lots of different places, and I've been very welcoming. I saw her at the beautification event on Saturday, and that was, of course, after we had already announced the plan, and she didn't mention anything to me at that stage about the boundaries and school assignment plan. Well,
what about Catania? I mean, has he been in touch with you?
What about what?
David Catania, has he been similarly not bringing anything up with you as, say, Bowser has done?
The last part again.
Yeah, so I mean, you say Muriel Bowser didn't bring it up when you saw her. I mean, have you seen
No council member has brought up anything with me, and that is not for lack of opportunity. Again, we've been working on this for 10 months. We've had focus groups with many people in the community. We've had informational sessions in which we've provided numerous proposals. Those proposals have been changed on many occasions in order to get to where we are today. That's why I say this has been an iterative, transparent, open, and inclusive process that has been available to anybody who wanted to participate. And there was no good idea. There was no good idea left behind.
Mr. Mayor, on this, do you see a difference between Muriel Bowser, who says she will start the process over, and David Catania, who praises all the work that's been done, but says he thinks it needs more tweaks and a little more time to implement?
I'll leave that analysis to you guys. We've put the plan out there. We stand behind the plan. We're moving ahead with this. We're going to start informational sessions, with families and those who are interested almost immediately. The implementation plan will be, done by the Chancellor and by the Deputy Mayor by the end of October. Whatever additional analyses you all would choose to engage in, be my guest. But I think I've been clear about where we are. We've announced the plan, and we're moving ahead with it.
They pulled the plug on January 2nd.
Well, it won't be a they. There'll be an A. Whatever. We've moved ahead. We've done our work. We've done a job that I think we're proud of. I'm proud of what Deputy Mayor Smith has done. There were 16 people on the task force that worked with her, a citywide group. It's been presented in many different places. We even presented this to a couple of our ANC chairs meetings. So I don't think there's anybody that can credibly say they didn't have an opportunity to know what's in here and didn't have an opportunity for input. You know what? And we could wait another 40 years, and you would have the same from some. You would have concerns expressed about it, because it is a complex, painstaking, complicated process that never should have been permitted to go 46 years or whatever it is without the attention. And embedded in this, by the way, is a commitment to say that the boundary and school assignment plan will be reviewed no less frequently than every 10 years, which is the right thing to do so that this doesn't happen again. Aaron?
More broadly, this boundary issue seems to raise a question of what principles from education reform under your tenure will be carried through in the next administration. What do you care most that they keep focusing on, that they try to carry forward? Are you worried that either candidate will be some kind of step back or step sideways from what you've been trying to do?
In terms of the broad situation, well, I hope that we continue on the path that we're on. I've been very supportive of an education approach that includes our charters, where there's options available to families, because I think both sectors become better as a result. We now have the most robust early childhood education program in America. We have been cited by the National Institute for Early Education Research, which is operated out of Rutgers. We now have 80% of our 3-year-olds who go to school all day, every day. We have 94% of our 4-year-olds who go to school all day, every day. I'm very anxious to see that continued. Very anxious to see continued the progress that has been made. We now have 25 additional schools this year that have extended day. I think a longer school day and eventually a longer school year will be down to the benefit of our children. It's one of the reasons why the politics ought to be taken out of this. You know, when I was chair of the council, there were people who came to me when the then Mayor Fenty presented his proposal to create PARA, and said, you know, we can't get rid of our Board of Education, we can't do this. And I said, show me where there's an argument that our children will benefit from doing the same thing that we've done for all of these years. And there were no credible arguments made. I was proud to lead the effort on the council to get the education reform legislation through. I was proud to do the legislation on early childhood education that was adopted by the council that has made us a leader. And I'm proud to have been a leader on education issues as the mayor of the District of Columbia. Again, I would urge people to take the politics out of this and focus on the substance of what's good for our children and for our families.
Can you endorse either candidate on education for what they've talked about?
I'm not going to endorse either candidate today on anything. Not yet. Still working on it. You're going to keep at this until you try to figure out how to get me to say who I'm endorsing, aren't you, Mark?
You mentioned this rodeo before, sir.
How come both of you all are here today? Does Channel 4 know you all in the same place? And they're paying both of you for this?
It's a boundary plan. There's a lot of moving parts.
And it took two of you to ask those questions?
I'm trying to train him so when I retire, he'll be ready.
You got a lot of work to do. Well, Mark, we'll go to you. Did he smoke you out? Is that what happened?
Well, let's move on, shall we? Last night, Chief Lanier issued a directive redeploying detectives through 2016, where a large number of detectives will be working patrol duty 1 week every month. Can you explain to district residents why this move is necessary right now?
Well, let me give you a general answer, and I'll ask Deputy Mayor Quanda to step in with more specificity. But one of the things that I think has been a hallmark of the chief's leadership among many is her flexibility, her ability to respond to a changing set of conditions and move people around in ways that clearly have had profoundly positive results in terms of crime for the people of the District of Columbia. Now, Paul, you can probably explain what the reasons are for this redeployment.
Actually, this is nothing new. In 2005, then Chief Ramsey initiated a redeployment plan, and at its height, we had in excess of 800 detectives, other individuals who were not assigned to uniform, who were doing essentially administrative work. 1 week out of a month would be redeployed. That number has gone down to 300 or so. So you had 500 individuals who had been given exceptions or exemptions from redeployment. That has an impact on the chief's ability to deploy officers where they are most needed. So this is just essentially a correction, a midterm correction, so that we can get back to the policy that has been in place since 2005 for officers who are doing administrative work once a month to be redeployed, as has been the practice since 2005. It gives us additional officers on the ground where they are needed most.
So the union says that while, yes, in the past, administrative detectives have been redeployed to street duty, what's different this time is that you have detectives, particularly from the 7th District, who would normally be investigating violent crimes, break-ins, robberies, burglaries, assaults, child-related crimes, who will now be taken away from those investigations for 1 week out of the month. And they say that's what's different in this case.
And if you go back to the tapes from 2005, they said the same thing then. The reality is, and I worked it, you know that there was a time when I worked for MPD. I ran an office at the police and fire clinic. I had lieutenants and sergeants who would plan for their redeployment. So you plan for it, you adjust your work schedule, nothing gets lost in translation, but what it does do, it allows the chief to be an effective manager, and that's what we pay her to do. To make hard decisions, to look at her resources, to deploy those resources where it best fits the citizens of the District of Columbia. And that's what she has done.
So is the union correct then that what is different this time is that she is redeploying detectives who would be actively investigating cases?
There were always detectives who were not in, I believe, homicide or I think the sex offense, sex assaults unit. Those detectives were always subject to being redeployed. As I indicated, when at its height, we had more than 800 individuals in those categories that were redeployed. Over time, that number has decreased. And so what we're trying to do and what she's trying to do is to do this correction, midterm correction, so that we have the workforce available where we most need them.
So from the outside looking in, it appears that, and you even said, that it's a midterm correction, she needs to deploy where resources are needed, would seem to indicate that there's a rise in crime that she's trying to address through this redeployment. Is that the case?
I don't think that's it at all, because overall crime is down. Robberies are down. Burglaries are down. There has been an increase in homicides, but for the last several months, you can see that those are coming down as well. So we're trending in the right direction. What I am saying is that we've had a policy that's been on the books for a number of years, and we want to adjust that to make sure that we have the officers where we need them. And we need them on patrol, very visible, to make sure that our continuing trend continue in the right direction.
So I apologize for beating this to death.
That's all right. We'll give you one more try.
If you're saying that crime is trending down, why is there a need to increase patrols if crime is trending down with the deployment that is out in the streets now?
Because like you, I want crime at zero. It's good to trend down, but I want to get it as far down as possible. And the best way to do that, time and time again, is to have a police force that is visible, that is there to be a deterrent. We want to deter crime. We don't want to arrest anyone. We don't want crime to take place. And that's the goal.
Deputy Mayor, on this issue,
yeah, it does.
One of the continuing issues you've had to deal with for some time is the retirement of officers. Has there been any speed up in the retirement of officers, which is causing a problem, or is it still about the same, a couple of hundred a month or so?
I think we're starting to see a slight increase in the number of officers, but this is something that has been predicted. We had a huge influx of officers coming on board, late 80s, early 90s, and so forth, and now they're coming up for retirement. And so the chief has been talking about this. We have been planning it, planning for it. We are trying to, we're continuing our recruitment efforts. Actually, we have sufficient recruits. It's just a question of every year we think we can get 300 men and women highly qualified through the academy, and that's what we're doing.
Did you say a couple hundred retirements a month?
Well, I mean, a couple hundred a month, but there's a significant,
right.
I'm sorry, a couple hundred a year.
Yes.
I apologize. It was a rare mistake on my part.
Is there film and audio on that?
My camera was turned off.
There are folks behind you who said there was nothing rare about that, Tom. I'll take one more question.
I wanted to follow up on that real quick, Mr. Quander.
You have to speak loud.
I just have such a soft voice. Sorry. To follow up on that, you mentioned that Chief Ramsey had put into place the redeployment initially. So at what point had it slipped so that officers were not being redeployed? Was that under Chief Lanier when she initially took over, or at what point was that?
No, what happened is that as a manager or a senior manager, you have sergeants and lieutenants and officers who may be doing administrative work. And there's a procedure whereby that senior manager can ask that sergeant or lieutenant be exempt for various reasons. Over the course of time, the number of members who were exempt started to rise. And so she noticed this rise, and she made the adjustment to say, look, everyone who had received this exemption, that exemption no longer applies. You need to come back in, and we will reevaluate to make sure that the criteria is set and that we can get the most officers, members of the Metropolitan Police Department, to be visible, to be on our streets, protecting our citizens. That's why I said it's essentially a mid-year correction.
I would invite you all to read the release on the taxi cabs. We're seeing continuing dramatic improvement in our taxi cab system in the District of Columbia, and there's some really good things that we have coming up, like the 5-day period in which people can get a commercial license to drive a taxi cab, the conversion of people who have medical challenges to using taxi cabs, the increased number of vehicles that will be on the streets for people with disabilities, and that release should be available to you. And I invite, we may even do an event on that as well. I will caution you, it is all good news, so do show up, okay? Thank you very much.